Sit right there. Okay? Well, actually, yeah. No, here, sit right here. Sit right here. I want them to see. She was here and I was on the inside, and I started to get up, and she grabs my hand like, no, okay? But she may not have noticed, but I noticed. In services, when you do open mic, you have lulls. And I didn't want the service to end on a lull, but I also was compelled to say something. So what I came to the mic to say was simply this. I introduced my name as Brent Ford. Didn't tell them I was a preacher. I said, I've visited a lot of people. I've met a lot of people in my life. But I've met few people ever that had the love for Jesus and had the grace in death of Vicki Whitney. And I told Gary, and I mean this with all my heart, I was our hospital visitation pastor in Dallas for 7 years. Every day, almost every single day of the year, including weekends, because our church ran 900, there was hardly a day of the year that I wasn't either in 1, 2, 3, or 4 hospitals every day. And so I've seen a lot of death, I've seen a lot of difficulty, I've seen a lot of disease, I've seen a lot of problems, from strokes with 30-year-olds to cancer, kids with cancer, to every kind of thing that you can imagine. And I've watched people, and I've tried to be an encouragement to people, and I've seen people hurt and hurt and hurt. But what struck me with Vicki was similar to my best friend in high school. My best friend in high school was John Hooker. John had bone cancer at 15. I don't know how long that he had it. I only knew him in my freshman, sophomore year, and in my sophomore year, he passed away. John was the same as Vicki. If you did not know, if anybody had not said to you, he has cancer, you would never have known it with John. John made me laugh. We ate lunch every day. I love vanilla milkshakes. That's my favorite. And they made fantastic vanilla milkshakes at school when I was in high school. I'm sorry for you young people today that they have taken that away from you in school. I really, really am sorry. But I had a vanilla milkshake every day of my life, my freshman, sophomore year when I was in high school. And look at me now, okay? And we would sit at the table, and he would have me in stitches every day. He was hilarious, okay? He never talked about his woes, never talked about how he felt. I never went to his house because he lived in Crete, which is quite a ways away from where we were. And he went to a different church, a gospel preaching church, a good church in the area. And we went to First Baptist Church of Hammond. And John was the type of kid that he was in so much pain, and so his bones were so brittle, he would step off the bus and he'd break a toe. Or we'd be sitting in chapel and he'd bend over to pick up a hymnal, or bend over to pick up his Bible, and he'd break a rib. Now he's in the hospital. And of all the young people that I've been around in my life, probably John has had more influence on me, and I wish he would have lived longer, more influence on me than any of my other friends that I did all the sports and went visiting with. That young man had an impact on my life because I've never forgotten how he maintained his love for Christ and how he maintained his grace in death. But Vicki was very vocal. And so I stood up and I said, folks, you don't know me. You wouldn't know me. And I tried the best that I could to be as incognito as possible. Again, I didn't want the service to end on a lull. And I said to Gary, I said, if you were to open up the dictionary and you were to look at the expression that we so flippantly use all the time, dying grace, you would see a picture of Vicki in the dictionary. Because that's who she was. Few people understand that God's grace is sufficient. She was very interesting because she said to her doctors would tell her, you need to have chemo, you need to have radiation. She says, I'm not doing that. She controlled every single facet of her treatment. And she chose not to go that route. She had a degree in nutrition. Wanted to be a nutritionist. And so she had a doctor when I was at their house, and we were talking about it. One of her doctors, and he was well known in this area, he said, if you don't do this, you die. She says, I'm not doing it. And he got so angry, he went out of his office and slammed the door of the room and he was done. And she said, you don't know that. He knows that. And anybody that she talked to, she truly believed that every day was in control by God. So if you couldn't add one day to life, or you couldn't take away one day of life, and that's how she lived. So what I said, beyond the comment about dying grace, I looked at the coach, and I looked over to the young man that had spoke, knowing that they both were probably lost. And what also struck me, and you did not know this, because I didn't share this, Ruby and Doug were there, was when Linda and I got out of the car, there was a lady that I had ministered to her mom, and Linda had ministered to her mom, that got out of her vehicle, and we're walking in to go into the church, and she's walking in, and she's looking at me like, what are you doing here? I'm looking at her like, what are you doing here? Okay? You know, and come to find out how small the world is, Vicki's son, who was in that crash, had graduated and had taught with her in school. She knew the entire story about him being killed in a flight going down to Oregon and flying into a mountain and being killed in his 20s. And she spoke as we were going in about Vicki and about her life. And I knew that she was sitting back on this side, about 3 rows from the back. And so I was talking to the coach, and I was talking to the young man who was a neighbor, and I was talking to Meg. And so what I was able to share, I didn't know what the pastor was going to speak on. Had no idea. And his introductory remarks as he came up to the pulpit was, I also was struck by the grace and encouraged by Vicki. Now here's the gist of the message. I want you to go to 2 Corinthians 5:14, because I shared this with the pastor. His name was Mike. Good man. 2 Corinthians 5:14 says, for the love of Christ constraineth us. The word constrained means motivates. It drives. That's what he's talking about. And I truly believe that in the life of Vicki Whitney and in all of our lives, that the driving force that makes us tick and what drives us to live for God is simply our love for Him, and that alone. It is sad that today, that we as men of God, the pastors, evangelists, preachers all across this country, have got to even mention that people should be faithful. That people should do the things that ought to be done simply because they love Jesus. Now, Paul lived a life of adversity. You can go to 2 Corinthians, I believe it's 2 Corinthians chapter 12. I'm not going to turn there, but it has to be 2 Corinthians 12 because chapter 12 of 1 Corinthians is a totally different text. So 2 Corinthians chapter 12, you can listen to the testimony of Paul. Tribulation, burden of all the churches, stoned to death twice and left for dead, beaten with the cat of nine tails like Jesus twice, unbelievable suffering. But Paul said, the love of Christ constraineth us. I do what I do because I love Jesus. That's all he needed. That's all the motivation that he had to have. Because he had met Jesus on the Damascus road. He struck him down and he said, "Who art thou, Lord?" And he said, "I am Jesus whom thou persecutest. It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks." And he said, "What wilt thou have me to do?" And he said, "I'll tell you what you do." He said, "You're going to go and see a man named Ananias." And when it was all said and done, he got saved, he got baptized, his life was changed, and he never looked back. But Paul gave his motivation. He didn't have to be propped up by other Christians. He was encouraged by people like Barnabas, but he just did what he did because he was deeply in love with Jesus. That was Vicky. I looked at that coach. I talked to the coach afterward. Actually, I said, the reason why you admired Vicky and looked over towards this side and looked Meg in the eye and looked at this other man over here, and I said, what you saw in her was she was real. Her life was in love with Jesus. She was insatiably in love with Jesus. I mean, I have been around lay people for 34 years of ministry, preaching for 37 years. She's on the top 5 of people that I've known who have that, who just absolutely was, when she was dying and they were bringing her to the hospital in the ambulance, she was, and this was said in the service, she was witnessing to the paramedics, she was talking to the nurses and the doctors in the hospital, and they were so intrigued and impressed by her message and what she was saying, knowing the pain that she was experiencing, and Gary said it was very excruciating before she died. That they wrote what she said in their journal or in their report. That's the impact that she had. So imagine that you have a son that is teaching a lady who is a Catholic who doesn't really know the gospel, and because of your life as a woman, as a mother, as a soccer mom that your daughter is playing, and yes, they won the state championship and all that is good, but the coach didn't stress that. The coach stressed, there was something that I always admired in her life. So I looked at the coach and I said, that's what it was. I looked at Meg and that's what it was. That's what it was. It was, she was real. There are a lot of people that talk about their love for Jesus, and then there are people that show their love for Jesus. Go back now, go to 2 Corinthians chapter 12, and then we'll wrap it up. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9 says, "And he said unto me, My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is" what? Made perfect. My strength is made perfect in weakness. She got it. She understood that. Paul, one of my favorite comments that he makes, you'll hear me quote it often. Paul said this, "I am what I am by the grace of God." When it came time for Paul to die, he told the church, he says, I'm on my way, I'm going to go, and you're not going to see me anymore. And they begged him, Paul, don't go. You know if you go there, they're going to kill you. You're going to be persecuted. You're going to die. You know what Paul said? This is the striking statement he made. None of these things move me. What moved him?